sign up button.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Google executives are facing new calls from Republicans to testify on Capitol Hill over search issues related to the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. Google says its move to block some search results was part of an effort to, quote, bar predictions for hypothetical political violence. Hillary Vaughn has more from Capitol Hill.
We could see executives from Google in the hot seat soon because lawmakers want them to come to a public hearing to answer their questions about the way Google operates and why in the aftermath of Trump's assassination attempt, the Google autocomplete search feature did not mention former President Trump's assassination attempt when prompted. Senator Roger Marshall has opened his own investigation and asked the company for an explanation into Google's policies, how the autocomplete function works, posting, quote, Google's top executives must come before the Senate Homeland Committee immediately. We're launching a full investigation into Google's litany of failures and history of suppressing conservative viewpoints. Time for accountability, time for top-down subpoenas.
More than 250 migrants on the terror watch list entered the U.S. illegally at the southern border during fiscal years 2021, 22, and 23, with at least 99 of them later allowed to enter the country and settle. That's according to a 19-page report from the GOP-led House Judiciary Committee, an assessment of the Biden-Harris administration's border policies and results that claims to show a number of border crossings by those considered dangerous. Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody calls this the greatest fraud of all time.
Where you have somebody that wants to be the commander-in-chief, Kamala Harris, wants to be in charge of national security, and now she's having to admit to the American people, oh yeah, we've released almost 100 people on the terrorist watch list into your country. We have no idea where they are, and those that we've told to report to certain states, we haven't even told law enforcement. Wow. So hey, trust me.
Minnesota murder rates have risen under Democratic Governor Tim Walz's leadership, as Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate attempts to link spiraling crime trends of the 2020 era to the Trump administration. Heather McDonald is a Manhattan Institute fellow and author of the book When Race Trumps Merit. She talks about what to expect for policing should Kamala Harris become president.
You should expect a law enforcement system that is driven by a lie. Both Kamala Harris and Tim Walz believe that policing is fundamentally, systemically racist. And it is that worldview that drives everything that they do within the criminal justice system. This idea that the police are the problem and not criminals is simply insane. In Minneapolis in 2021, over 300 blacks were shot. One was shot by the police, and he was shooting at the police first. That means that 0.3% of all blacks shot in Minneapolis were shot by the police. The criminals are the problem, not the police. And when you have a law enforcement leader, whether it's an executive of the country like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or a governor that believes the police are the problem, we are all going to suffer.
A former small business owner in Minnesota is criticizing Governor Tim Walz for his COVID policies. Chris Woodward has more.
Lisa Hansen spent 60 days in jail for opening her bistro near the end of 2020. Hansen told Fox News Channel's America's Newsroom program that she had no choice given that her business and many others were struggling financially after being told earlier that year they could not be open.
I told my husband, I said, we can't do this. We can't survive another shutdown. So I had two choices, Bill. I decided I was either going to close my business permanently because we couldn't afford to stay in business any longer, or I was going to open up fully, see if we can survive this.
Hansen said the governor did not have authority to decide what was essential and non-essential, but she could not find a judge to agree. Governor Walz said his actions were the right thing to do and that such policies were meant to slow the spread of COVID-19. Hansen disagrees.
His policies destroy the American people's rights, the Minnesotans' rights to be specific. He destroyed so many businesses in the state of Minnesota, never to open again. He destroyed so many lives in Minnesota, literally. The man is a criminal, and he should be impeached, and he should be prosecuted.
I'm Chris Woodward.
More news online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
The loss of a child through abortion, miscarriage, or stillbirth affects the emotional health of families. Feelings of anger, sadness, and regret can be overwhelming. There is hope and healing in the aftermath of a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline at 866-482-LIFE to talk with someone who has been where you are and healed to help others. Your call is confidential. 866-482-LIFE.
Welcome to Today's Issues, offering a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Tim Wildman here with Fred Jackson. Good morning, Brother Fred.
Good morning.
And how you doing, Chris?
Good morning.
Chris Woodward with us. And in Kansas City, KS is Ray Pritchard. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Tim. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm assuming Fred and Chris are okay. You're
absolutely.
Here. You're here. You showed up.
Yeah, that's right.
Half of life is just showing up.
I was voluntold to be here.
Right? Somebody said that. Half of life is just showing up.
That's right.
So
hey, let me say something, Tim. Too, if anybody ever's looking for a day to go online and watch us, we're in sartorial splendor today. Got dark blue. And then, Fred, that's
teal.
Teal? Would you call that teal?
Teal, sure, yeah.
That's beautiful. And then the brightest orange polo I have ever seen in my life, Tim. It looks like it's a good golf day for you.
Yeah, don't tempt me with that because it doesn't take much. Yeah. But I tell you what, I guess I'm channeling my inner Tennessee volunteer today.
Exactly what it looks like.
It looks like Tennessee volunteer orange. And you're donning the red.
I got bright red on.
Got the Ole Miss red right there, right?
Yeah, this is Ole Miss red. That's right.
Yeah.
Football is coming.
It's coming. What do we got? 2 weeks till kickoff?
Roughly, yeah.
Something like that. What's today? Whatever.
First games are a week from Saturday.
I am proud to say that my university will not. Well, we will not lose to Alabama this year. We don't play them.
Your university, Mississippi State University,
yes.
will not lose to Alabama this year?
Yes, for the first time in years. They will not lose to Alabama.
And why is that, Chris?
Because they're not on the schedule.
Bada boom.
Yeah.
Boom. Ole Miss can say the same thing. Not playing Alabama this year.
It was funny because they put out the new schedule, and it's not going to be every year, this kind of thing, but they put out the schedule to include Texas and Oklahoma, the new members of the SEC.
Oh, good.
And people were like, great, we're not – oh. Yeah.
Yeah, for the have-nots in the SEC football world, it's just, okay, we'll give you a break from Alabama. Let's see, here's Texas.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. The funny thing is, so Vanderbilt inherited Alabama. Anchor down on that one, Commodores.
Oh, man. You know what's so funny about, I shouldn't need, but with some of these schools like Vanderbilt, poor Vanderbilt. Now, they can compete very well in baseball.
Yes, much like MSU. They are a baseball school.
They can compete in baseball at a high level. They can compete in basketball and other sports. But football,
it's tough.
Vanderbilt is just it's never going to change. But whoever the coach is acts like it is. And that's the new coach every 3 or 4 years. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, you'll say anything as long as they'll pay you $5 million a year, okay? And I don't blame them.
No.
I don't blame you. You come in there and you say, hey, we're going to take this program up and
I can be a cheerleader for $5 million.
Right.
That's right.
I'm thinking, you can put this on rinse and repeat in about 4 years because there's certain elements against you in the sports world that are never going to change, and especially in collegiate sports. Professional sports, they try to promote equal opportunity, right?
Parity, right?
Parity. That's why they have
salary cap and all.
Salary cap. Right? You have the draft, and the worst team drafts first. And they do that to try to keep fans' interest because you don't want to have a team that loses every year for the rest of your. Who's going to buy season tickets for that? No opportunity.
Same thing in hockey.
Yeah, it's a smart move because you give. you give each team a chance with good management and good fan support, an opportunity to succeed. So, all right, you're not listening to Sports
ESPN.
World here, but ESPN. But we are 2 weeks away from college football, I think, and I know a lot of folks can't. It's kind of an escape from this.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Political football eternity that we're in here in America.
Yeah, we're going to go from talking. Many millions of people across these United States will go from talking about polls to which team is in the poll.
Maybe. Yes. A good. I see what you did there, Chris. All right, Chris, what's the first story?
We begin with some breaking news.
Is it breaking, Chris?
It sure is. And Fred is, you've put this on the website?
Yes.
J.D. Vance and Tim Walz have agreed to a vice presidential debate on October 1st. It's going to be on CBS News. Vance and Walz, of course, are the vice presidential candidates, J.D. Vance being the Republican, Tim Walz being the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee. I say presumptive because they've yet to have their convention. Nonetheless, Vance and Walz are going to agree. Again, it's on October 1st, hosted by CBS News. The Trump-Harris debate, the one and only at this time Trump-Harris debate, is still confirmed for September 10th on ABC, although, as we have discussed in this program, Trump wants to debate Harris as many as 3 times on some other networks.
Please no.
I'll let them know.
We don't need 3. 2 max.
Yeah.
I think it is good that the vice presidential candidates have agreed Fred, to a debate.
I think that'll be very interesting, as we have been reporting over the last couple of weeks. More and more information is coming out about Governor Walz and his associations, and but also we've seen J.D. Vance blossom. We played a clip yesterday. Was it on CNN? He was being challenged, and how he responded to things. He is very comfortable, I think, in this kind of public forum. So it should be a very, very interesting debate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Both military backgrounds, the whole controversy with Walz over his alleged military background, and then J.D. Vance on his time in the Marines. So that should be very, very interesting.
Yeah. Walz, the governor of Minnesota, he did serve in the Minnesota National Guard for 24 years. I think the controversy is about him saying he carried weapons of war, of battle, and he didn't.
No.
But he said it. We played it before. I don't know what he's going to do about that one. He's going to have to. I think he's ultimately going to say, "I misspoke," or "I apologize. I didn't mean to say that." Whatever. But so far he hasn't rescinded that, has he? Or the media won't push him on it much. I mean,
not yet, because
but he will have to in the debate. If he gets in a debate situation, he'll have to answer for it.
I hope. We're not sure how CBS questions how they're going to go, but
Vance will bring it up.
But Vance will bring it up. Yes,
Vance will bring it up. As I mentioned yesterday, Ray, I don't know how much you've seen of J.D. Vance.
He is super impressive.
Yeah, I think so.
Sharp and smart in that book. What Hillbilly Elegy? Hillbilly Elegy. Tremendous story from a guy who rose from a tough time in Appalachia and ended up in the Marines and U.S. Senate and now prospective vice president. No, he's an impressive man, and I don't have any worries about him in that debate. He's going to hold his own just fine.
Just a warning about the movie. I haven't seen the movie based on the book, J.D. Vance's memoir, his life. I was told by somebody who saw the movie it's a whole bunch of cussing in there. So I just want people to be forewarned. We're not endorsing the Ron Howard movie.
Good.
I haven't read the book. I've got the book, but I haven't read it yet. But it's J.D. Vance's testimony of being abandoned by his mother. His mother was a drug addict.
Yeah.
This is in the book, and he was raised by his grandmother. Basically, it's one of those stories. He came out of the hills of Kentucky and then in Ohio, and that's why he called himself coming from hillbillies. And he made himself what he is today. I mean, just a United States senator, and it's a tremendous life story. And I've heard him speak now many times over the last few months. Of course, he is conservative, which I like politically, but he's also well-spoken, and and a reasonable person.
Yes.
And Ray, you going to comment on that? I just like his demeanor.
Look, he's gotten his sea legs under him. You know, it's a little bit of a tough start there, and the media went after him from the get-go. But he went on the Sunday morning talk shows. I don't know if you guys saw any of that. He acquitted himself very well in a hostile media environment. So yeah, I think he's a 5-star guy.
Yeah.
And that debate will be substantive and sharp, and I think there'll be some sparks flying both ways.
Now, Walt, Chris, just on his part, as far as him being a speaker, he seems to be a pretty good speaker.
Yes.
That I've seen him. I don't agree with his politics, but just to give him credit, I think
he is
pretty emphatic. You don't quit. He doesn't bore you,
right?
Or he doesn't. His personality, especially if you like his politics, would be something you'd say, yeah, you say it, you know.
Yeah.
All right, next.
Well, I fully expect, I would be shocked, quite frankly, if CBS doesn't make it a point to bring up what they call reproductive rights. We call it abortion. Because Tim Walz and Vice President Harris have been running hard on abortion. They say, in their words, abortion is on the ballot. And they have promised.
They don't say it like that, though, do they?
No.
They say reproductive rights.
They do. Now, the reason I say it will be interesting and necessary, I think, for this debate to include the issue of abortion is because Tim Walz is pro-abortion. He's not pro-choice, like he's pro-abortion. And what's interesting here, I've got some audio. I combined a clip. We've already played it on the show a couple of weeks ago when Tim Walz was first announced as Vice President Harris's running mate. But it's Tim Walz touting abortion at a recent Planned Parenthood rally, and then it's going to be followed by audio of pro-life activist Ryan Baumberger talking to Washington Watch this week about Planned Parenthood's racist past. Clip 5.
My record is so pro-choice, Nancy Pelosi asked me if I should tone it down. I stand with Planned Parenthood, and we won.
The origins of Planned Parenthood are rooted in this mindset that certain people didn't deserve to live. Those who were considered unfit, those who were children who were born out of wedlock, and women who had children out of wedlock or outside of marriage. And of course, poorer blacks, which is what precipitated the Negro Project, which was to target poorer black communities with birth control because their promise was birth control would lift you out of poverty. And it never did. And it never does, actually. And so today it's abortion on demand, where literally abortion is the #1 killer in the black community. It kills more black lives in 2 weeks than the KKK killed in a century.
Yeah, Margaret Sanger was the founder of Planned Parenthood. Lest we forget, Hillary Clinton received the Margaret Sanger Award.
Right.
Need to remind people, Planned Parenthood likes to put their abortion clinics in areas where black Americans in their residential areas. They target the black community. People need to understand that. Sanger went after African Americans. That's why she set up Planned Parenthood. And of course, the mainstream media doesn't like to do that history on Planned Parenthood. But there's Tim Walz on the record praising Planned Parenthood. And Kamala Harris became the first vice president in United States history to go and visit an abortion clinic. Remember she did that in Wisconsin back several months ago, and they made a big deal of it? First time in history that a vice president went to an abortion clinic. The Democratic Party, Harris and Walz are all in on killing unborn babies.
Yeah. One thing that Walz will probably hit back Vance on is a comment Vance made a couple of months ago, if it's been that long, when he was on Meet the Press, and he told the host of Meet the Press that he does support access to the abortion pill mifepristone, which was an issue we covered on AFN. Many pro-life people were upset with that. So Vance better have a good answer to Walz's comeback that you yourself support abortion somehow, some way. So we'll see how all that plays out in October. Another issue, this also involves Governor Walz. He was one of the people that locked down his government a lot during COVID. As a matter of fact, he issued not one but 2 lockdowns in 2020. And I've got a grandmother here. She's been on various news programs for the last 24, 36 hours. Her name is Lisa Hansen. She owns a bistro, or she did, and she decided after the second lockdown, I can't afford to stay closed. I have to open. We have to earn a living. And as a result of her decision, she spent 60 days, 60 days in jail for opening her bistro near the end of 2020 when Governor Walz announced another shutdown. Yeah, she has since moved to Iowa, but at the time she was in Minnesota here, and she made these remarks to Fox News, clip 6.
His policies destroy the American people's rights, the Minnesotans' rights to be specific. He destroyed so many businesses in the state of Minnesota, never to open again. He destroyed so many lives in Minnesota, literally. The man is a criminal, and he should be impeached, and he should be prosecuted.
It was very hard to get words out of her.
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she has since moved to Iowa.
Probably
after
for
all
her,
this.
it's the free state of Iowa.
That's right.
It is ironic. There's a difference, right? In the Midwest in particular, you can go state to state, and the politics can be drastically different.
Oh, look, you can go from Illinois with its left-wing, heavy-handed, almost totalitarian government. You can go to Indiana.
Right.
It's another whole world.
Yeah.
Okay, Ohio, a truly conservative state, right? Then you can go north into Michigan, and you got what? Is it Governor Whitmer? Or something?
Yeah, it's a completely different worldview politically.
To Ray's point, you can go from Chicago to Portage, Indiana, and feel much safer. And it's a short
so
drive.
True. Yes.
But I was thinking about Minnesota and Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota is basically a socialist state now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you just heard one of their citizens form, but Iowa is conservative. But Iowans and Minnesotans, if you talk to them, they're not a lot different from one another. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think the reputation in Minnesota is largely driven by Minneapolis. St. Paul.
It's the big cities.
Yeah.
I saw somebody the other day. I think I mentioned this, Ray, and Fred and Chris, but I saw somebody the other day and said we're really not. It's really not. We're really not controlled by blue states. America is dominated to a large extent, by blue cities.
Correct.
That's right.
Correct.
That's right.
Yes.
And if you look at any map after a presidential election, it's almost 90% red.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But then you go to New York, Boston, Detroit,
Los Angeles,
Chicago.
San Francisco. Yeah.
Why is that? Why do you think that is, Ray?
Well, I don't know. I'm just thinking about the point you raised. I mean, Chicago is left, almost off the cliff. Come to the suburbs, it's red, and then get further. Get 100 miles away from Chicago, it's deep red. It's the same way in Minnesota. You got Minneapolis, very deeply blue. But you get out there,
right,
in those smaller towns, it's okay. New York City, deep blue. I often go to Word of Life in upstate New York. You could hardly get to a redder part of the country than upstate New York. There's just not enough people up there. But it's very conservative.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think big cities tend to attract groups of people who are more dependent on government help. And so when you have that gives local government more and more power.
Yeah. Also, they're generally big pro-union areas.
Especially Michigan.
Yes, and any pro-union area is going to be the unions and the Democrat Party are joined at the hip. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it's going to be wherever you find the influence of the unions is going to be they're going to be blue, deep blue areas. I was just thinking about the country. I guess the only place now. Well, maybe not the only place. I haven't thought through this very, very much, but I was thinking about the state of Florida. Florida used to be kind of a purple state. Mm-hmm. They would vote for a Democrat. They would vote for a Republican statewide, I'm talking about. Now it's a red state. And, of course, a lot of people attribute that to Governor Ron DeSantis. Basically, he's registered a lot. He's helped, not just him, but the Republican Party in Florida. They registered, been busy registering a lot of people. Mm-hmm.
Well, it was also his decision to lift the restrictions on COVID.
Yes.
That was huge.
Yes, that made national news.
Mm-hmm.
It also attracted a lot of new people to move to Florida during COVID because of Governor DeSantis' open up policy. And And so Florida has become a red state. But I was thinking, in Florida, if you look at a statewide map during an election, I think when DeSantis won, whenever it was 2 years ago, his reelection bid, I think it was only like maybe a couple of places in Miami and maybe a couple of places in Tampa, that were blue.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else was red. I do think also in Florida, you mentioned how DeSantis opened up pretty quick.
Yes.
For COVID, but also they have good tax and policy. They have, from a conservative point of view, they have good regulation policy.
Also, what he's doing with regards to parental rights. We have
that's big.
We have a story on our website, afn.net, today where DeSantis, under his parental rights campaign in that state, has endorsed 23, I think it is, school board candidates. Now, how often do you hear of a governor getting involved with school board elections? But he has endorsed 23 school board candidates because they support parental rights.
Listen, I think any other time, Governor DeSantis, who is a rock star, if you look at his track record from a conservative point of view, he's very smart. He would have won the Republican nomination, but Trump was unstoppable because, especially after the indictments started coming down, it was circle the wagons mentality, and so people basically liked Trump's first term as president. So all those things made it very difficult for Governor DeSantis to get any traction to challenge Trump. And then, of course, Trump started calling him the sanctimonious and said he was a horrible governor and all this. Trump doing what Trump does is demean people, But I do think Trump became unstoppable. So I think maybe in 4 years, DeSantis may have a chance again. Of course, Vance, if he's VP, he would be the preemptive and probably unchallenged nominee. So, Ray, you've got some. I'm thinking about DeSantis. I'm thinking about Vance. I'm thinking about some others. You got Kemp in Georgia. You got Reynolds and governors in Iowa. You've got some other people out there. The Republicans seem to have a pretty deep bench.
Well, they do, and a lot's obviously going to depend on what happens in November, because and right now, it's an interesting question, which we probably ought to ask. What is the state of the race right now here? The state of the race seems to be rather confusing here in the middle part of August. I mean, a month ago, before when Joe Biden was still there, and then right after the assassination attempt, Donald Trump was going to win this. He was going to walk away.
That changed quick, didn't it?
Boy, it did change quick.
We're going to talk about that when we get back. Let's take our break right here. We're going to talk about that when we get back. The polls in these swing states are just dead even. I mean, it's just razor thin. And who knows, is it going to stay that way from here to November? We'll see. We'll talk about that more when we get back from the break. You're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
It's an old story. I'm sure most of you have heard it more than once, but it's a timeless story and worth passing on again and again, even if we have heard it before. Around the year 1490, there were two young men, both struggling young artists, who were very good friends. But both of them were also poor, and that meant that they had to support themselves while they studied art. Because the work took so much of their time and energy, their advancement in the field of art was extremely slow. Discussing their plight, they came upon an agreement. They would draw straws, they decided, and the one who won would study while the other would work to support both of them. The two drew straws, and the one who lost went to work to support both of the men. The young artist who won went to the cities of Europe to study. History records that he soon became recognized as one of the outstanding artists of his time. A part of their agreement also said that when the one who won the drawing became successful, he would then support the other in his studies. So, after gaining success, the winner went home to get his friend and let him come study art, while the successful artist supported both men on his earnings. When the man who had become a recognized artist saw his friend again, he discovered that the very hard manual labor which his friend had to perform had caused his fingers to become stiff and twisted. He was no longer able to execute the delicate strokes with the brush, which were necessary for an artist. It was apparent that the dream of becoming a successful artist could never come true for the man who had lost the drawing. The successful artist noticed a very unusual trait in his friend whose fingers were twisted. The friend accepted his fate not bitterly, but was happy that he'd played a part in the success of the other man. He actually rejoiced in his friend's success. One day the artist came upon his friend unexpectedly. He saw him kneeling and praying. He was praying for the success of his friend, although he himself could no longer realize his dream of becoming an artist. Something about the kneeling man caught the attention of the artist, and he hurriedly sketched the hands folded in prayer. Later, the artist took that sketch and from it drew one of the most famous and copied paintings in the world. The man who painted the hands was Albrecht Dürer. The man whose hands he painted was Franz Nigstein. And the picture he painted is known today as the Praying Hands. The beauty and inspiration of the Praying Hands comes from the life that made it possible. And remember also that drawing a picture of beauty and inspiration isn't nearly as important as living one.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
As events unfold and new information is made available, you deserve to know your news source is reliable. That's why more and more people trust American Family News. It's timely, accurate information with no hidden agenda, just integrity. And we cover areas that other news outlets are afraid to touch, like church matters.
The reality is our kids need to understand the Bible's influence on our founders, the Bible's influence throughout our history.
Missions updates.
More than 300,000 children have been forced from their homes in Haiti this year.
And the fight for life.
Bates is challenging an Oregon Department of Human Services rule that excludes her from adopting any child because she would not violate her religious beliefs to promote Oregon's radical gender ideology.
You can settle for what's called mainstream, or you can tap into the flow of news that matters most to you and your family. American Family News. Find us on the radio, online, or on our app. Get all the details at afn.net. afn.net.
As it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love him. 1 Corinthians 2, verse 9.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
Thanks for listening to today's issues on American Family Radio. Tim, Fred, Chris, and Ray, we thank you for listening to the program. Joining us now from the great state of Minnesota is our good friend Jan Markell. She's the president and founder of Olive Tree Ministries and heard each weekend here on the radio program, Understanding the Times. Good morning, Jan.
Good morning, Tim. Nice to talk to you all.
How are you doing today?
We're doing well up here.
Okay, I haven't talked to you in a while, personally at least. I haven't been on when you've been on the program. Yes. How's Olive Tree Ministries?
Well, we're doing just fine. You know, I mean, it's a busy time. Not that certain seasons are not busy, but right now it's an interesting time, and I'm trying to keep up with everything. And I'll tell you, it's more and more difficult.
Now you did your annual big conventions or whatever you call them. Conferences. You did those for years and years. Are you still doing those?
Well, yeah, and Fred attended a couple times too. I believe he's there with you now.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. Well, we've downsized it a little, and we have them about 4 or 5 times a year. It's just a smaller in-person audience, but we're getting a much greater online audience because we're getting hundreds of thousands to be able to tap in online. So it's just a little bit different emphasis. They're still going. And again, they're 4 or 5 times a year. They can go to olivetreeviews.org and just go to events, and everything's in line there.
A lot of the emphasis of your ministry, I'm just saying this for the people who are new to AFR who don't know a lot, and is Bible prophecy and current events and trends and things of that nature, right?
Yeah, and trying to enable Christians to better understand what's happening in light of the Bible. And, you know, we can take all the political information and everything else that's hitting us from in the media, some of it good media, not all of it's bad, a lot of it is, but not all. But, you know, unless we have that biblical perspective, it really still won't make sense. We just need the biblical perspective, which, of course, I mean, American Family Radio, that's what you folks are doing 24/7. But and then ministries like Olive Trees tries to come alongside of you folks and help folks better understand the times and become watchmen on the wall. And that's what the Bible asks us to do. So we're just trying to equip the saints.
Yeah, I tell you what, Jan, Bible prophecy, there's always been an interest in it, but it has intensified. When I talk to people now, they want to know, you know, for instance, right now, what's going on in the Middle East? Where does Israel fit in Bible prophecy? I know you deal with, for instance, the World Economic Forum. What does that have to do with the one world government that we know is taught in Scripture during the tribulation period? So, you know, if anybody says that the Bible isn't current, they do not understand Bible prophecy and how it applies today.
And Fred, I think something that's contributing to that is the fact that our churches are pretty silent on these issues, and that's for a dozen different reasons. It's kind of all of them tragic. Not every church, but by and large, they don't want to go there. It might be controversial. It might offend people. It might not be the theology of those sitting in the pews. And so that's contributed, I would say, to the disaster.
Yeah.
Talking to Jan Markell. Jan is a prisoner in, she's a political prisoner in Minnesota under the regime of Governor Tim Walz, W-A-L-Z. Jan, Walz.
Kim John Walz.
That's good, right?
Well,
there.
now we know how she feels.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. What? Tell us about him. He's the VP candidate for Harris, as we know now. What can you tell us as a Minnesotan about Walz?
I'm always somewhat shocked when people say, well, I never heard of him, because, my goodness, in 2020, he and Minnesota in general were headline news because he delayed the National Guard for many, many days, to the point where about a mile section, 3/4 of a mile section of Minneapolis burned to the ground because of the riots, the George Floyd riots in May, June of 2020. And remember, his wife was the one who's now quoted. She opened the windows of their homes so they could enjoy the smelling of the smoke from those 2020 riots. So now I hope you know the character of this couple. They shut all of our churches down for COVID in 2020, And I think just a note of history here that 100 years ago, the Communist Party targeted Minnesota, other places too, Chicago, Madison, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, particularly Twin Cities. And then I would say some 30 years ago, in the 1990s, was formed the Red-Green Alliance. Communism and Islam came together, and headquarters now out of Minnesota, mainly Twin Cities. And believe me, this is a deadly combination to be in your hometown, a Red-Green Alliance, Islam and communism. And it took hold in a relatively godless state. Now, having said that, there are certainly Christians here, but there are a lot of Christians in name only here, a lot of non-evangelicals, and I'm not going to get into denominations, but the state is very lost, and thank God for the evangelical remnant.
Talking to Jan Markell. Ray, did you have a question for Jan?
Yeah, Jan, about the situation in the Middle East, it seems like we've been on pins and needles for the last couple of weeks, wondering if Iran is going to unleash a major attack on Israel. And each day it seems, well, maybe they will, and then we're told it hasn't happened yet. So what's going on? What do you expect in the Middle East in the next few days or weeks?
I have a feeling that they will not attack, and the only reason I'm speculating like that is because they're saving up everything for the big attack outlined in Ezekiel 38 and 39, the Gog-Magog alliance that's going to unite with Iran, Russia, Turkey, and some other countries in the latter days, and we don't know the timing, the latter days, and this confederation will attack Israel and try to seize the spoil, and God will intervene. So this may be during what's known as the tribulation, but again, we don't know for sure. My hunch is they will wait for that opportunity rather than have their right now. Israel would retaliate by striking their nuclear sites.
Yep.
I think that's a given. I don't think they want their nuke sites touched. I really don't. But we'll see, because what they're doing is just having their proxies do all the dirty work, Hezbollah, Hamas, and now the terrible, terrible unrest in the West Bank that we would know as Judea and Samaria.
Talking to Jan Markell. Jan, what do you got coming up this weekend on your show?
I got to think. What have I got coming up this weekend?
Just make something up. You know, we don't know.
No, this is reality. I'm going to play portions of Michelle Bachmann's message that she gave to, again, this is at her kind of downsized conferences. On August the 1st, she spoke to us here in suburban Minneapolis, and I'm going to play remnants of that. And then I have a Christian police officer on who was a SWAT man himself and who's going to speak into the Trump assassination and the likelihood that it was probably, possibly anyway, more than one person, and we've got a cover-up, in other words, going on. So I think the 1-2 punch there will be of interest to your listeners.
Okay. That's the radio program Understanding the Times, heard Saturdays and Sundays here on American Family Radio. Understand that the times are, it's a noon,
1 o'clock on Saturday, noon on Sunday.
Noon on Sunday. That's when it's noon on Sunday.
I'll post our lineup.
Central time.
Yes.
And 1 o'clock on Saturdays, Central time. All right, Jan, take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
It's very interesting. Jan was talking, speculating about what may happen in the current tension in the Middle East. Heard an interview with, I believe it was retired General Keith Kellogg yesterday on Fox, and he was asked about this, and he was an advisor to former Vice President Pence. He was asked about, okay, what do you think is going to happen? And he said this, and it's the first time I've heard this. He says Iran is scared of Israel. Iran is scared.
I believe that.
Is scared of Israel because Israel punches back hard. And they, just like Jan said, Iran is holding off because they are concerned that if they attack Israel right now, Israel will respond by going after their nuclear establishment.
That's why the only thing that's somewhat effective against Israel is guerrilla warfare. Like Hezbollah on the north, Hamas. Iran funds those.
Yes.
Terrorist organizations. Despite the fact that Iran is a Shia branch of Islam and Hamas is a Sunni branch of well, I don't know. Hamas is more known as a political organization, not really a religious group. But I'm saying the Hamas terrorists are Sunnis and not Shia. I know that's getting complicated for a lot of people, but otherwise, but they have the common enemy. The common enemy is Israel and their hatred for the Jews.
Yes.
That's basically, and of course they hate the U.S. too. Iran's, and I'm not talking about all Iranians. Probably most Iranians don't want to live under this totalitarian regime that dominates their lives, called the Ayatollahs.
Yes.
But the Ayatollahs took over. Was it the 70s, Ray, when the Ayatollahs took over?
Right. That's right.
Remember that? The Iranian Islamic Revolution, and they overthrew the Shah?
Yes.
That's right. That's right. And Iran has been in the grip of those radical,
right,
even by Islamic standards, radical
right,
mullahs over there who looking for this last imam and who really believe that by wiping Israel off the face of the earth, they are serving their God. Because it's not as if the average Iranian person shares their view, but they don't have freedom. They don't have freedom in Iran to change the government.
It's like China.
Yeah.
You know, they're dominated. It's a totalitarian state controlled by the mullahs, in this case, the Ayatollahs, and they are dictators, and they control the police, and even though the citizens, a majority of them, probably a vast majority, remember they had an uprising about 5 or 6 years ago.
The Arab Spring.
Yeah, they had an uprising in Iran. A lot of people came out for freedom and to get out from under the oppression of. Because remember, a lot of people were critical of Obama, I think, at the time, saying he's not doing enough to show support for these folks. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw a picture the other day of Iran in like 1975, the streets of, and it looked like a Western country. It showed these children going to school in normal clothes. The women didn't have on all the Arab, not the Arab necessarily, but the Muslim, coverings. They look more
westernized.
Yes, and so back to the original point about Iran being scared of Israel. I think that's true of all the countries in that region because of this reason. If they start seriously attacking Israel, these other Arab countries around there, or in this case the Persians, the Iranians, directly, they're going to suffer severe consequences to their. It's going to be Turkey. I know that guy over there in Turkey, Erdogan. What's his name?
Bergeron.
Yeah, he keeps saber rattling, but he's not going to do anything. No. He's not going to send troops into Israel. He doesn't want a war with. Who wants a? You don't want a war. You want a regional war with Israel. Really, that's what you want. I don't think any of them want that. And furthermore, and I've mentioned this before. Type in Samson
project.
Samson option. Samson option.
Samson option. SAMSON. Samson option. Okay, that's what it is. And that is, if Israel's attacked, I guess even seriously enough with a bomb, or certainly a nuclear bomb that Iran might send over, that you couldn't take out necessarily with an Iron Dome thing, but if they but maybe they could. Israel is set to basically set the world on fire. Okay, read about it. That they will unleash nuclear bombs that will turn Iran into glass.
Yeah,
that threat is there, and I think that threat is real. If Israel feels like they're, what's the expression? Existential.
Yes.
Threat. Go ahead, Ray. You want to comment on this good news that I got for you right there?
Well, everything you said is 100% correct. Israel is prepared, if they are attacked like that, to respond and destroy Iran, not just their nuclear facilities, but take them out as a functioning country there in the Middle East. And that is what the Samson option is all about. Everybody hopes and prays it never comes to that. But does anybody doubt that if it finally came down to it, that Netanyahu would give the order? I think he would. And
I think he would too. Yeah.
That's one thing that keeps the Iranians from pushing the button on their side.
Right.
And if that wasn't to happen, I think you need to go back to the history of the wars against Israel since it became a state again in 1948 and how God intervened. You should read those stories on what happened when those Syrian tank drivers came out of their tanks and said, we can't stand it inside. We feel this pressure all of a sudden. Israel was greatly outnumbered military-wise, but they still became the victors in that, in what happened. So, if a nuclear response is not it, then God will intervene.
Well, listen. By the way, you're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Chris, Fred, Tim, and Ray. Ray, I want to ask you about this. Speaking of what Fred's talking about, Israel's role in Bible prophecy and the miracles that have taken place over Israel's existence to demonstrate that God's hand is on their country and on those people. If you look, the very fact that Israel became a country in 1948, tell us the story of that. Can you share at least some of it?
Well, let me just give the part of the bigger picture. If you go back to the Old Testament and you read about, you have all those nations in the Old Testament in with ITE, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Hittites, right? The Ammonites, the Amorites.
Then the Beatles came along.
Well, there
they
you go.
They didn't have ites, but no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, look, all those nations were enemies of Israel, enemies of the Jewish people. They are gone.
Mm-hmm.
Israel endures. The Jewish people endure. After all that's happened, after all the attacks, after all the pogroms, after the Holocaust in World War II, Israel has endured. It is, I think, the greatest miracle in history that the Jewish people have not, that they've been scattered, but they've not been wiped out. Their ancient enemies have been destroyed, and they are no more. But Israel, if you go back, and Fred, I'm going to turn this back over to you to mention some of those stories, but it's just phenomenal. There is no way that the Jews should have been able to survive in 1948 when they were attacked virtually from every side and the Arabs came up against them. But God delivered them and has delivered them ever since.
And Israel had to reform as a country to go along with what the Bible talks about the tribulation period. Israel has to be a country before we get to the tribulation period. So that's why I say I do not believe Israel is going to be destroyed before the Lord returns. It's going to be there. It's going to be intact as a nation because what the Bible teaches us is after the rapture, and I know not all people agree with that teaching, but I do. After the rapture, you have...
You do, and you got the microphone.
The Antichrist comes along and has this peace agreement with Israel. So Israel has to be in place when that rapture occurs. So that's why, whether it's Israel defending itself with a nuclear weapon or it's God directly intervening, Israel is going to stay intact.
Yeah, and just a little bit of history, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong. Because Ed's a historian, and he will correct me if I'm wrong, but he's not here today to correct me if I'm wrong, and he gets great joy out of that. Okay, Israel, if you look at the map in the Middle East of what's currently the country of Israel, okay, prior to 1948, that did not exist. That is the country of Israel, which is what you're talking about, Fred. Prior to 1948, that did not exist. That was a piece of property, piece of land controlled by the British.
Mm-hmm.
And then before that, I don't know who controlled it before that, but you go back to the Roman Empire, you go back to the, I would have to, Ed would be able to tell us this. He is very smart on all this history. But It was a British mandate. Is that what they called it?
That's exactly right. I
British-
think it was the Turks before.
Because you had the British Empire. It was a reason it
Sure.
was called the British Empire. They were
That's right.
worldwide. Go ahead.
Right.
It was the Turks before the British,
I think that's right. Right.
and then maybe the Romans before them or something. I don't know.
And several others. in
Several
between.
others come and goes
Yeah,
over the
right.
centuries.
That's
but
right.
but I think it was either the League of Nations or the United Nations. The League of Nations preceded the United Nations. Had sympathy for the Jewish people post World War II because of all the suffering. It was then the genocide that was going on in Nazi Germany. So the sympathies of the world, basically, maybe the Arab countries, not so much, but they were with the Jewish people, and they wanted to establish a Jewish country for them to grow and feel safe and have their own identity. So that's what happened, and almost immediately the fighting began, because you had some people living there who were Arabs who hated the Jews and didn't want them there. They began to fight, as humans have done since the beginning of time. Basically, fought over land, and so the fighting began. But the Jewish people there, and that's some of the miracles you could read about. The Jewish people prevailed even against almost insurmountable odds, especially when they were attacked in 1967 by 3 different Arab countries at the same time that surrounded them: Jordan, Syria, and Egypt. Right, Ray?
That's right.
At the same time, they were attacked, and they beat them all back. And that was, their very survival was at stake at that time, and Israel won that war. They've also, the Israelis, and listen, the Jews still have to believe in Jesus to be saved.
Amen.
Absolutely.
That's right.
We're not saying that we are saying that they are God's chosen people, as the Bible describes, but on an individual, personal level, a Jew is no different than a Gentile in terms of he or she must receive Christ, ask for forgiveness of sin, and give your life to the Lord. That's not what we're talking about here. But the Jewish people, they're very intelligent as a whole. They're very industrious. They know how to make money. They know how to do business. They're stereotypes that fit in with what I've just described. But also in the country of Israel itself, their very survival's at stake, depending on what they do when they wake up every morning to defend themselves and protect themselves. And the country they've built there is quite amazing. I've been to Israel like 27 times. I've lost count, taking tour groups. It's Tel Aviv, 3 million people, I think, is a very modern, progressive, and I mean that in the good sense, city. They maintain Jerusalem. I think there's 600,000 people that live in Jerusalem, probably 80-20 Jewish Arab. Even the Arabs who live in Jerusalem and like living in Israel.
Yeah, because it's a whole lot better.
Yes, it's a beautiful land. It's desolate in places, but even that has its own beauty. The Dead Sea, the Judean desert. You've got the Sea of Galilee, which is beautiful, and then Haifa, and anyway, it's a very prosperous, especially for its size, country. And so I'm saying all that to say I think God has blessed Israel since 1948 in innumerable ways. Sadly, a lot of the Jewish people don't fully understand that yet, but we're supposed to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, right?
That's right. That's right.
And pray for the Jewish people. Pray for everybody, but pray for the Jewish people that they would see Jesus as their Lord. All right, Ray, we're going to take a break, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll take a break. Fred, Chris, thank you.
Thank you.
And Steve Paisley Jordahl will be with us momentarily. Stay with us.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
When you hear us mention the AFR app, you probably think about your smartphone. We do have apps for Apple and Android users, but it doesn't stop there. If you have an Alexa, we've got you covered. But wait, there's more. Sorry. There's also an AFR app for Roku or Apple TV. So many ways you can listen to your favorite show, podcast, or music. Find out more at afr.net/apps.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. A possible end to the war in Gaza could be near, with peace talks in Qatar taking place today. Trey Yingst has more from Haifa, Israel.
Ceasefire talks have reportedly resumed today in Qatar as the Middle East waits for an agreement. The meeting is considered a high-stakes last-ditch effort to reach a deal and end the war in Gaza. Overnight, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave his negotiating team a wider mandate to bring to the table. From Israel, the heads of intelligence agencies, the Shin Bet and Mossad, are part of the team, along with a top advisor to the Prime Minister. While the Americans, Egyptians, and Qataris are participating, it's unknown if Hamas will take part in the talks. We are still looking at the possibility of a three-phase agreement. The first phase could see up to 33 living hostages released. The deal would end with a reconstruction project of Gaza and support for vulnerable Palestinians affected by the war. In Haifa, Trey Yingst, Fox News.
Vice President Kamala Harris proposing a federal ban on price gouging. Republican Senator Eric Schmidt reacting.
When she was vice president, currently, she was the tie-breaking vote on the American Recovery Act and the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. That pumped $2.4 trillion worth of spending into the economy, which has directly led to the inflation that we see.
The latest Consumer Price Index report showed inflation eased slightly in July, but it only means that prices aren't increasing quite as much. Home, energy, car, and child care costs have all increased since Biden took office. Stephen Moore is an economist and author, serving as a senior visiting fellow in economics at the Heritage Foundation. He says Americans can't pay their bills, and it's Biden's fault.
The rate of inflation is coming down, but everything's still getting more expensive. And so if you look at just the price of going to McDonald's, if you look at the price of buying meat and eggs at the grocery store, if you look at people's rent and mortgages, those are up in some cases by 25 and 30%. A new report just came out yesterday by the Federal Reserve Bank showing that Americans are having to go further into debt because they cannot pay their bills.
Former President Trump delivered remarks on the economy in Asheville, North Carolina, the former president vowing to reverse issues raised by illegal immigration.
If Kamala wins, you will have mass amnesty and citizenship for all of the Biden-Harris illegals that poured into our country. If I win, you will have the largest deportation operation in American history, starting at noon on Inauguration Day 2025. The reason they're coming is because people like Gavin Newsom and people like Kamala are saying, come, come, it's the American dream, come. They're destroying our country. We can't do it. We can't let it continue.
A judge in Ohio said the law that bans gender manipulation for minors will stay in place.
Franklin County Judge Michael Holbrook said the SAFE Act does not violate the state constitution. SAFE Act stands for Saving Adolescents from Experimentation Act. Not only does it keep so-called gender transitions from taking place, but it also says males cannot participate in female-specific athletic programs. LifeSite News reports Holbrook also said that challengers' disapproval of this policy belongs in the arena of public opinion, not in the courtroom. Jessica Franz is with the Ohio Republican Party State Central Committee for Senate District 5.
Very excited that we have some protections in place for children.
Franz said she firmly believes this is a mental illness and that it needs to be treated as such.
And we've got, money-hungry doctors and medical lobbyists that are trying to take advantage of these children and making money off of their illness.
Franz explained that before getting on the State Central Committee, she was a school board member in Bethel Township in Miami County.
I was faced with dealing with an issue where a male identifying as a female wanted to use the female bathrooms and locker room facilities. All that to say, I'm very familiar with the fight that is going on. We had girls that were holding it all day long to avoid going into a bathroom and being faced with the issue of having to run in with the male. It was giving them a lot of anxiety and even some health issues.
Franz said the only thing she's sad about with the SAFE Act is that it does not go far enough.
We still don't really have anything in place legislatively that says males cannot use female bathrooms or locker room facilities and vice versa.
I'm Bronson Woodruff.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
What we believe about the Bible is based on what we believe about its source.
The God Who Speaks, the award-winning documentary from the American Family Association, is now available in a special limited edition DVD set. This release includes a Sunday school curriculum and 2 hours of additional footage. Go to thegodwhospeaks.org to get your copy today. thegodwhospeaks.org. Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Tim Wildman, president of the American Family Association.
There are a few things more disappointing in life than thinking you're getting a fresh, hot cup of coffee and hit your tongue and it's lukewarm.
Oh.
Yeah, that's
not meant to be.
No. And I like cold coffee too, but I like it hot or cold. I'm like the Bible. I like Bible coffee. Give it to me hot or cold, but lukewarm, and I'm ready to spew it out of my mouth.
That's biblical.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna open up a coffee shop. Call it the Bible Coffee.
Bible Coffee.
The Bible Coffee Shop. Hot or cold, nothing in between.
Mm-hmm. No Laodicea here.
That's exactly right.
Steve Paisley Jordahl joins us. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, everybody. Apparently, should we announce there's some job openings at AFA coming up?
No, there's some Java
openings.
Yeah, openings.
Yeah.
Bada boom.
Yeah, so things are going okay. My wife yesterday, she told me I can be an idiot sometimes, and I'd like to.
How long you been married?
I'd like not that long, but
Keep going.
I'd like to thank her for giving me permission and tell her I will use the privilege judiciously.
Right?
You mean only sometimes?
Sometimes.
I know. Best thing to do when your wife tells you you're an idiot is just say, just acknowledge it. Okay,
That's right. Just own it.
Own your idiocy, so you can move on.
I'm just sitting here imagining if Ed was here, how he would get himself in trouble.
Yeah,
right.
In this conversation.
Should have saved that for next Monday or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, Chris is gone. Steve is with us. Steve, what's your first story?
All right. Do you remember that yesterday we talked about this group called Evangelicals for Harris, and we played a little bit of their ad?
Yeah.
I want to remind you what that sounded like. Cut 15.
Have you been to the cross and said, Lord, I have sinned. I'm sorry for my sin. I'm willing to change my way of life.
Have you ever asked God for forgiveness? That's a tough question. I'm not sure I have. I don't bring God into that picture.
All right. So guess who's speaking now about this? Franklin Graham to the rescue for the win. This is what he tweeted out yesterday. The liberals are using anything and everything they can to promote candidate Harris. They even developed a political ad trying to use my father, Billy Graham's image. They're trying to mislead people. Maybe they don't know that my father appreciated the conservative values and policies of President Donald Trump in 2016. And if he were alive today, my father's views and opinions would not have changed.
That is so wrong of that group. Evangelicals for Harris, is that what they're doing?
Yeah.
To use the altar call of Billy Graham, which most every American's heard many times, to exploit that to try to say voting for Trump is I don't know what he's saying. I don't know what exactly they're trying to say there. And then how do you get from that vote for Harris?
Well, what the writing was on the screen, it wasn't audio, so we didn't include it in the clip, but the writing on the screen says, is there any clearer way to deny Christ than to say you don't need his forgiveness? And then it just said,
well, has Harris said she received Christ?
On their
prayed for forgiveness?
On their website, Evangelicals for Harris, they have her testimony. They have her faith journey.
Okay, I'm gonna say this, and this is maybe would need some explanation beyond what I'm going to be able to tell you here, but I'm going to vote for a politician who's going to hold office based on their qualifications, based on their credentials, based on what they're going to do, not based on whether they're a Methodist or a Baptist or a Hindu. That I would pay attention to that because it does affect their worldview. But that's not the end all be all. Listen, Jimmy Carter was a Southern Baptist Sunday school teacher.
Yes.
I'm sure Jimmy Carter understood the gospel message and believed it by all accounts. Okay, I don't know him personally, but he was a terrible president by a lot of people, and that's how history remembers him. Maybe it's not all fair what happened to his administration, but I'm just saying he's not viewed as a very successful CEO of America. All right,
you know, evangelicals for Harris. I want to question them about, okay, how do you feel about Harris and where she stands on abortion?
Yeah, 9 months. She's for abortion through 9 months. Right.
So you want to support a presidential candidate that is all in on killing, murdering unborn babies?
Listen,
you're okay with that?
Yeah, I asked them that question. I would have more respect, Ray, for somebody who said, I'm not going to vote for anybody.
Right.
Now, I don't agree with that necessarily from a American citizen responsibility perspective, but I'm just saying. But to say vote for Harris,
right? Look, this is a diabolical ploy, and I think it has to be taken quite seriously. Last night, this group had a huge Zoom call with tons and tons of people.
Did they really?
Yeah,
okay,
they did.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they did, and they had their spokespeople, including professors from places like Wheaton College and notable, and I'm putting evangelicals. You can't see me, but I'm putting evangelicals in air quotes. Okay, because they're way to the left, way to the left. But the argument last night is that Mr. Trump is completely unqualified. It will be a disaster if he comes back into office. They hate him so much. They are willing to overlook the abortion, the radical transgendered stuff.
How about Israel? We talked about the treatment of Israel. I mean, Trump's friendly to Israel.
They are quite willing to overlook all of that and say it's got to be Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
We might have said this yesterday when we talked about this, but Megan Basham has a book out called Shepherds for Sale, and her contention is that these people are taking issues that are clearly biblical, like life, like sexuality, like marriage, and they are telling evangelical influencers, no, those are political issues, and it's contentious, so you probably shouldn't talk about those. And they're taking issues that are clearly political, like immigration and climate change, and saying those are biblical issues.
If they pass the offering plate, is George Soros the biggest tither in their church? Because this what it sounds like.
His money
it sounds subversive.
His money
is coming into these people that are trying to influence the
Christian
evangelicals.
Vote. Yeah, and if they can suppress a Christian vote by who would otherwise vote conservative by 1 or 2%, that may affect the election.
Well, and I think you used exactly the right word. I don't think they're trying to talk evangelicals necessarily into voting for Kamala Harris and the other guy. I think what they're trying to do more is suppress evangelicals, make them discouraged, so that on the fence evangelicals will just say, forget about it. I'm not going to vote. Or when it comes to the presidential race, I'm going to write in another name. Because in that case, to write in another name or to leave it blank is really a vote for Harris.
I don't think it'd carry either way there.
You're listening to today's issues. Next story.
All right. The Kamala Harris phenomena continues.
She's a phenomena now?
She's a phenomena.
Okay.
Yes. And it's showing up in the polls a little bit. She has been had a bump in the polls, especially in swing states. It's getting a lot closer now. It's a lot of people are calling it a toss-up. Nate Silver, who's a political projector, now says it went from a likely Trump win when Biden was running to now a toss-up at best. Frank Luntz was talking about this the other day, and
he used to be on Fox News a lot. What does he do now?
Well, he's still a pollster. He's still a commentator.
Was he on Fox News or somebody else?
I haven't seen him on Fox in a while. I think he comes to CNN and some of these other places. But I don't know that he necessarily crafts his message just for them. I think his numbers, he does focus groups, and not just polls, but
yeah,
he does.
I've always liked hearing
Yeah.
his reporting over the years. Yeah.
So anyway, I want to tell you what his contentions are now with regard to this election. Let's listen to cut 14.
People who are not interested in voting for either Trump or Biden. So the entire electoral pool has changed. And if it continues in this direction, you have to start to consider Democrats winning the Senate and Democrats winning the House. The actual people who are participating, she's got intensity now. She's got an intensity advantage. She's got a demographic advantage. And I haven't seen anything like this happen in 30 days in my lifetime. The people who are undecided have all collapsed towards Harris. The people who are weak Trump have all collapsed towards undecided. It's his broad shift.
That's interesting. I was looking at the battleground state polls. Wisconsin, Harris up 1.2. Listen how close these margins are. Harris up 1.2. This is Real Clear Politics. Pennsylvania, the virtual tie. Michigan, Harris up 2.4. Arizona, 0. Basically Trump up 1. Nevada, Trump up 3.5. North Carolina, Trump up 2.4. Georgia is basically a virtual tie right now, Georgia. So, to Frank Luntz, the statement there, part of what he's saying is the polls are tightening. If you believe the polls, all I would say is about the polls. If you're going to say to the polls, I believe them one day because your guy's up, and the next day they're phony because your guy's not, let's don't even talk about the polls anymore. But if you want, I'm looking at the Real Clear Politics average. This is an average of all the polls, which I believe, okay? And it showed just basically, Ray, a virtual tie. Let me tell you, and if you are a person that gets upset because somebody criticizes Donald Trump, it's time to turn off the radio. Okay, I'm just going to give you
not you, ma'am. No, don't touch your dial. You're fine.
I'm just going to give you a fair warning because, and I've mentioned many times before, I love Trump's policies when he was in office. For the most part, I think he did an excellent job, and I voted for him 2 times. But I'm going to try to give an objective analysis of the people out there in the country who don't follow politics very much, but they do start focusing maybe a month or 2 or 3 months out from a presidential election when they're trying to decide. They're not really conservative. They're not really liberal. They could vote for Obama and then they could vote for Trump back in the past, or vote for Romney and then there are people out there like that, especially that's what they call them in these swing states. But there is Trump fatigue. It's a real thing. And there are a lot of people who are put off by his personality because he is boorish and he doesn't know when to shut up. And he talks about how big people are and how fat they are and how dumb they are. And he does this over and over again, and it turns people off, these people in the middle. Now, if you care about policies, you're going to ignore those, quote, mean tweets, and you're going to vote for your guy. I understand that. But I'm just telling you the reason the polls are getting closer, and this doesn't mean he's going to lose.
Right.
He may very well destroy her in the debate, and he wins going away. I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm saying the polls have people thought, well, Harris would be worse than Biden. No, she's not. She's a living, breathing person who can talk. People were worried about Biden. They weren't going to vote for Biden, but they didn't want to vote for Trump. Those people are now saying, I think I'll go Harris.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that is a real factor. If we live in our little conservative bubble here and don't pay attention to these real factors, we're going to miss it.
And let me bring you the bad news first. The Democrat convention is next week, and she's going to get a bump from that too. So it always happens. They have a political convention. The candidate for the party whose convention they just had always gets a bump in the polls. Trump got it a couple weeks ago when the Republicans had their convention. The biggest factor right now that I'm hearing that people are saying about whether or not she can maintain her lead in the polls is whether or not
if she has a lead. It's tied, basically.
What can make the difference in this race, they say, is if Kamala is able to stay in the basement from now until November, then she has a good chance of coming out smelling fine and winning. If she has to do an interview, which she hasn't done one now in 25 days, a good sit-down interview, other than taking softball questions from rope lines for 30 seconds, She hasn't given an interview in days. And if she can, and the press is starting to get a little frustrated about it. If they can shame her into having a conversation where it's more than just a 10-second answer, I think you're going to find a lot of people sour on her pretty quickly.
Right.
Well, the other wild card here, Steve, is at the convention next week. It's all scripted, right? It's all pre-planned. So I think the only wild card that could happen, because it's in Chicago, and we've talked about this, the pro-Palestine, the left wing, super pro-Palestinian, the pro-Hamas group, they've already tried to disrupt a couple of Kamala Harris events. If they come out in a big way and somehow manage to disrupt the Democrat convention, that could, I think, change the calculus somewhat.
I still think when looking at, polls are still saying the economy and the border are the big issues on people's mind, in particular the economy.
Yeah.
There are, the mainstream media is going to help the Harris-Walz campaign. For instance, there's an AP story came out just before I came in the studio. Here's the headline: U.S. shoppers sharply boosted spending at retailers in July despite higher prices. And what they're trying to portray in this story is that everything's really all right. Americans aren't that concerned about the economy. But what this story and other economic stories are not talking about, for example, American consumers are now more than $1 trillion in credit card debt. See, these stories about consumer spending don't talk about cash and credit card. They don't separate those things out. I've heard stories this week. Fox has been running some stories on how is the economy affecting you. There are stories from 79 and 80-year-olds who saying they're having to go back to work and work a couple of jobs just to pay for their drugs and their groceries. There's another family that wrote in and said we had to eat corn on the cob for 5 days until we got our Social Security check. This is the reality that's out there. And, the mainstream media and Harris and Walz can try to spin this all they want. But at the end of the day, Trump is going to win on the economic and border security issues. He's going to win on those. The mainstream media is going to try to steer away from this. Mm-hmm. Now, we're going to have the first joint Biden-Harris, I hesitate to call it a news conference, but they're going to be together tomorrow. And Joe Biden said yesterday on a rope line question, our economy's great, and we're going to tell people there's going to be a soft landing to the economic woes. Well, people aren't seeing any indication of that.
Mm-hmm. All right, you're listening to Today's Issues on American Family Radio. Fred, Ray, did you want to say anything to Fred's sermon?
let me just make a quick thought. About 5 weeks ago, Trump was up clearly 5, maybe 6 points and cruising. Okay, everything's changed. If I had to guess the state of the race, not where it's going to end up, but if I had to guess the state of the race today on August the 15th, I still think Mr. Trump is leading, but it's now 1 or 2 points. It is much closer, and I think it's going to get closer yet, Steve, for the reasons you mentioned right after the Democrat convention. It's going to be in September a dead heat.
Mm-hmm. Very likely.
Yep. All right, you're listening to Today's Issues. Next story, Steve.
All right, let's talk about our media. You remember Elon Musk and Donald Trump had a conversation on Monday night, and they talked about a whole variety of things, about an hour and a half long. And CNN has pulled, yesterday or the day before, they pulled a clip from this. And to say that they selectively edited it to make Donald Trump and Elon Musk look bad is to understate this. So what you're going to hear right now is you're going to hear the clip that they pulled. CNN pulled. And the first things, the clip comes in the middle of a sentence. What they're asserting, what Trump and Elon Musk are saying is that they're talking about the bombing at the end of World War II of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Right, so let's hear kind of like
and Nagasaki were bombed, but now they're like full cities again. So
right,
it's really not something that
That's right.
So it's not as scary as people think, basically.
This is Dana
Suggesting
Bash.
that the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, now it's okay. Kind of trying to blow off the impact of that.
So that was Dana Bash saying what he's saying is that it wasn't so bad that they bombed Japan and nuclear weapons. They're just callous people. Well, I want to let you know this is the context from that discussion. This is other things they said surrounding that comment about Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Let's listen to cut 12.
People have this fear of nuclear electricity generation, but it's actually one of the safest forms of electricity generation. After Fukushima happened in Japan, I actually flew there and ate locally grown vegetables on TV to prove it. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed, but now they're like full cities again. So
Right.
it's
Well,
really
that's
not. It's not as scary as people think, basically.
You know what? Go ahead. You want to
Clearly, they were talking about nuclear power, not nuclear bombs, something that Dana Bash knew very well.
CNN.
All
right. So, the thing about it I didn't quite understand about that interview, when I saw the video of that, it was on X, which is formerly Twitter. Elon Musk owns it. And so he's doing a space or what, I don't know, what do they call it when they do an interview?
Twitter Spaces. Yeah.
Twitter Spaces interview. And, of course, probably millions tuned in. I don't know what the numbers were, but I'm sure it was pretty phenomenal. And Elon Musk himself has just an enormous following on X around the world. But if you're going to do an interview like that, to me, is either Elon Musk flies to where Trump is or Trump flies to where Elon Musk is. When I saw it, it was Trump talking to his cell phone on his desk. Did you see that?
I did.
That might be the way that Spaces is designed to work
Well, it
for
shouldn't.
people like a Zoom. It's Twitter's Zoom call, basically.
Well, what I'm saying is, and I didn't listen to it, but it makes people said, well, Trump sounded funny here.
Right.
Even Trump
Right.
admitted to that. He sounded weird on the, and I'm thinking, why that was not. You didn't have to have that. You could have gone where he was, or he could have gone where you were and do radio like we're doing right now.
Go to Best Buy and get some.
Good
spend
night.
a couple $100 and get some good equipment, right?
Heard by millions of people, and you're going to go with your cell phone on your
I know.
desk on the speakerphone. I mean,
we need to rework that idea here a little bit.
I think that was marketing Spaces as much as it was about Donald Trump being.
Yeah,
Well, yes.
I know.
Well,
Elon
yes.
Musk was marketing his business, and I understand that. But you got to have. It was. People said it was of bad quality sound, and also when you don't, when you aren't able to see each other,
Right.
it's very easy to talk over each other. Go ahead, and of course Elon Musk can talk, and Lord knows Donald Trump can talk. So they,
their whole exchange was fascinating.
Yeah.
And supposedly seen or commented on by a billion impressions. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean some fantastic number that X put out. So I don't know how to judge that. But look, I think Elon Musk would be happy to host Kamala. Oh, I wish she would go on there.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I wish she would. And let the governor Walz go on there and let J.D. Vance go on
Right.
there.
I'm sure he would have them all on. I'm talking about Elon Musk. By the way, while we're on pause, we've got 1 minute to go here. You guys see a point in RFK Jr. continuing on? He's only polling 5-6 points. He got no chance to win anywhere. So, you guys see him continuing on here?
Well, was Steve that you mentioned you read a report that he's looking for a cabinet deal from.
He has been in contact with the Harris Waltz campaign, according to reports, looking for a cabinet position.
How do you do that?
You say, hey,
You
can
call-
I
you
serve
call
it?
him up.
You call him up and say, hey, can I be your
Make a
Secretary
deal.
of Agriculture or whatever?
Evidently, that really happened.
So you say, if I quit, will you?
Yeah, yeah.
Will you
Well,
hire-
he would quit if he was, if they said that. I don't know. There's other reasons why you maintain a third-party campaign, which is to bring up issues that are important to you that want to remain in the conversation.
Okay, well, don't have time to talk about that more, but it deserves more time. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us on this Thursday. Fred, thank you.
You bet.
Steve.
My pleasure.
Ray, appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.
All right, Adam Sudduth, our producer. Chris Woodward was here earlier. Jan Markell. Tomorrow's Trivia Friday. We'll have a lot of fun. We'll see you back here then.
You know, there are many ways we can impact the world around us. Some